Welcome. I'm J. Michael Silver, and this is Foundational Steps, the show where I talk with people about the choices they made in the past to get where they are in life. In this episode, I'm talking with Jodie Bentley. She is a powerhouse actor, producer, creative business coach, just an unstoppable entrepreneur. We have such a great conversation about her childhood and early motivations to create success for herself. If you ever wanted to pursue a career as an actor, make sure you download her free ebook. Link is in the show notes. All their links to find Jodie and timestamps for things that came up while we talked are in the show notes as well. Don't forget to leave a comment or review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And check out our affiliate links in the show notes. There might be something of value for you. Enjoy our conversation. Welcome, Jodie. It's good to see you again.
Hi, good to see you.
So obviously we were talking beforehand, which is why we're laughing, which is
Yep.
always fun. Real quick before we jump in, it just kind of occurred to me. We know each other from acting. We know each other from a workshop
Yes.
5 years back, 6 years now,
Ah!
something like that.
I went to that workshop in 2013 when I first moved to LA. I feel like you were
I
there.
was there. Oh yeah, I was there because I was there.
Oh,
I think, I mean, if I was still in the workshop today, I think I've been going there for probably 18 years, since
okay,
almost the very beginning of that workshop.
got it. So
Yeah.
8 years, 9 years then. I've
Yeah.
known
My
you.
God, time just flies. I had no idea it'd been that long.
Yep,
That's funny.
yep.
And you were a New York actor?
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
lived in New York for 20 years, went to college there. So yeah, I was there for 20 years total.
oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, moved
So
there
yeah, and
at
then
17,
you're out here and doing the thing as everyone does,
doing the thing.
and I'll do, there's a little preamble that I kind of do to kind of introduce the guest, and so I'll talk a little bit more about who you are,
Great,
and because it may or may not come up in our conversation,
great,
so we'll
right,
see.
right.
So I'll dive into my first big question, um, which is, at what point in time did it occur to you that you were alive in this body, having this experience, and your choices like actually had an effect on your surroundings, your life, your being? I know, big question.
I'm like, are you my therapist? What's happening? I feel like I have multiple answers to this question. Honestly, like the first thing that pops in my head was preschool.
Nice.
Um, it,
I love the earlier, for me, I find it more interesting because it's not that later answers aren't real, but I feel like sometimes later experiences sometimes make us forget
mm,
our more early experiences, and then they get colored. Our early experiences, if we remember them, then shed light on our later experiences that have kind of eclipsed, you know what I mean?
yeah, a
And
thousand percent,
so,
a thousand percent.
and maybe it's also being an actor and doing the internal work, but maybe that's why you're able to recall and think about that preschool. So
Right.
let's hear it.
Um, I was the kid at preschool who, like, as soon as my mom dropped me off, I was like, bye, and like ran in and needed to know what was going on, was curious about everything, and had this sense of freedom.
Nice.
And I think, look, I mean, I've talked about this stuff and unmined this stuff for years of my childhood and how it's
Mhm.
affected me. I grew up with a special needs sister, so she was 2 years older than I, and she still functions on the level of a 2-year-old. So
Wow.
yeah, so essentially, I was the younger sister, always the older sister,
Mhm.
and that family dynamic really shaped me, of course, right? And I
Mhm.
think at a very young age, I was very aware that my sister was different. We called her special. She was special in my family. That's how we always referred to her. I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons I learned from my parents was belonging, and everyone belongs and everyone has a place, right?
Yeah.
We're not hiding her away because she's different. Like, she went to the supermarket, she went here, and she'd cause a ruckus and make a mess, but it's what happened, and it's
Yeah.
just what she did, and it was fine. But I think I realized very early on that the dynamic was different, but it was fine. It's who she was, and I embraced it. But my relationship with my parents was very different, and I had so much responsibility on me as a kid. And I think I was hyper aware of not making the situation worse for them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I was the good girl, got straight A's, never rocked the boat, didn't cause the problems. I'm independent. I can take care of myself. I don't need you. I was very autonomous at a young age, which I feel, I lost out a lot on that, parental
Sure.
protections.
But you didn't know that at that time.
No, that I didn't learn that till my 20s, and even still in my 40s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, or how much I was missing out on. But I just knew that I was this independent person who had to be independent, and I can take care of myself. And I did. And I think even at 8 years old, that probably deepened, because then I became the built-in babysitter for my sister. I took care of her. I was parenting her almost to help my parents, both working full time and trying to balance having two kids and a special needs daughter. So I think I realized early on that the choices I make is going to affect this entire family.
Yeah.
So I got to make the right choice.
Yeah, it's powerful. That's really powerful. So you said there's a few other moments. So were the other moments when you were still, let's just say, under the age of 25?
Yeah.
So how did those moments kind of reshape or realign you in your kind of awareness of, making choices and being in this body kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think around like 8, 9, 10, there was a shift in responsibility. Again, I just think that deepened that whole thing of just responsibility, or the choices I make affect everybody, and I have to do right by everybody. Then I think it was going into junior high school, where then, in my high school, okay, so I grew up in a town in Massachusetts, New Bedford, Massachusetts. And it was a city, and it's a very lower middle class city. It was a melting pot of people, like I always grew up with diversity. Like there's, Puerto Ricans, Cape Verdeans, Black, I grew up with all those, everything. In New York, I lived there, melting pot. California, melting pot. I've always been in a diverse community. And like my high school, I graduated with 3,000 people in my high school.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Your senior class was 3,000 people?
No,
or just the whole high school?
The whole high school was over 3,000. Like my graduating class, I think there's not like 1,000, maybe.
I mean, it's still a lot of people.
It was a big school.
It's huge.
So, oh gosh, now I lost my train of thought. It was just big school. So good. So junior high was rough. Junior high, kids brought knives in. They had to do it. Like it was rough.
I had similar experience in my junior high. Yeah, because that was the first time where a lot of different neighborhoods were coming together. And so we didn't know each other necessarily. Like there were some sports where, the different neighborhoods would mix. But for the most part, junior high was the first time there was a lot of kids that we had never met or didn't know existed. And they were from all, wealthier, less money. And I had more than one run-in with kids, and not, some were white, some were Black, some were Hispanic, that were gang members. And I didn't know what a gang was. But I knew that I didn't want to be on the bad side of a gang if I could all avoid it.
Right.
So,
that energy, right?
Yeah, I know that energy. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't think I want to get involved with this.
Oof. So it was similar. It was just tough, like I would be afraid to go to the bathroom during class because I knew I'd get beat up if I went to the bathroom. I managed to talk myself out of everything whenever I was confronted. I don't know how the heck I did that. But it did. Little
Yeah.
5 foot, whatever girl, little white girl talking herself out of these crazy
My
situations.
sister was the same way. And I kind of always thought it was a little bit of how we were raised. But then as we got older, I felt like my sister, because she was so small, like she never made it to 5 foot. I think she lied for a short period of time and was like, I'm 5 foot. She never made it to 5 foot. But the older I got, I think that she was tough because she was small.
Mm.
And I started noticing that as I got older. So I don't know if that's for you was part of it, just being small. You're like, nope, or what?
Yeah, I just think it was. Well, I think I learned in junior high. That's when kids got mean. I mean, let's just be real, right? Like
Yeah,
in elementary school, I feel
the
like
hormones start kicking.
it's just different.
Yep.
But that's like I distinctly remember a moment. My sister was in the front yard of the house on her tricycle. And these like boys, teenage boys, 13, 14, walked by the house. And I remember I was in the front room and I could hear, and they were walking by, yelling at her, making fun of her, saying all this stuff.
Mm.
And little like 12-year-old Jodie like walks out of the house and I let them have it. So I
Wonder
think
Woman coming to the rescue.
exactly. I was like, you do not talk to her that way.
Yeah.
So I think there was just a lot of like, I felt like I had to fight for her and stand up for her and stand up that she had a place and you can't put her down. And I think a lot of that came from protection and wanting to protect her, which then carried over into junior high. I got to protect myself. I don't want to get beat up. I got to protect myself. So I think I just learned to stand up for myself through her as well, just protecting her.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
No, it makes total sense. I mean, the fascinating thing for me that regarding the things that shape us is that more often than not, they're unconscious. We don't really choose them.
Right.
And we are forced into making a choice, which you could look at it a couple different ways. You can say we're forced into making a choice, or you can say our nature comes out and we make the choice because this is who we are.
Yeah, I agree more with that because there's multiple. I could have just let them say what they said and not say anything.
Could have hidden. You could have gone out there and watched. I mean,
Right.
there's a myriad of possibilities, but there's some innate part of you or part of all of us that for whatever reason makes the choice. And some of that is conditioning, some of that I think is nature. And in order to make any changes, you have to be aware of what your natural instincts are and what your natural conditioning is. You don't necessarily have to separate the two, I don't think, but you do have to accept who and what you are to be able to say, okay, I want to make this change now.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and that's I think one of the most interesting things for me when I'm talking to people is it's not so much were they aware of making the choice, but just what choice they made.
Yeah.
And having an awareness as it's happening. It's almost like an out of body experience for me. Does that so you're did you have a sense of like almost out of body, like you're almost going out there and you're almost watching yourself do this?
I think I had lots of moments like that, but but on the flip side, I think a lot of it was unconscious as well. Like I think it was both. I think oh gosh,
like the conscious moment, like, so we're talking about these conscious moments, like where you're in this body and you're making these decisions.
Yeah.
So when did that happen? Like, so like specifically with the kids in the front yard, you go out there and you're like, nah, not happening. And she kind of taught you how to stand up. After that moment, did you kind of have a rush of like, what did I just do? Or I just did that? Or was it the moment before running out there? Or do you not remember?
I don't recall.
Yeah.
But all of it, I just want to say it felt like who I was. Like I feel like I already became that person. Like I feel like just by the nature of being her sister and being in that family conditioned me to I don't want to say fight, that's not the word I mean, but just
Be strong, stand up.
protect,
Yeah.
be in responsibility.
Yeah,
That's what,
yeah, I love that, being responsibility, and that really, I think, goes back to preschool then, because that really is the defining moment, it sounds like, for you.
yeah.
Excuse me. um you know, and that's, I mean, that's so powerful. I feel like, because, you know, I mean, it doesn't matter when it happens to some regard, but the more, I think, you know, we look at, you know, where these things come from, we can draw power from them. You know,
Yeah.
even if you were, you know, quote unquote weak in that moment, you can still draw power from that,
Oh,
because
sure.
yeah. Do you
Sure.
see, totally off where we were going, but did you have moments of how you would you define yourself at and any weird moments as being weak? Like, because it sounds like you have just this amazing history of strength and putting yourself out there.
That's a really great question. And the word weak is very triggering, isn't it? It's an
No one
interesting,
wants to be weak.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I know I don't. I'll be vulnerable, but weak is that's
yeah,
an interesting word.
right.
Um, you know, I think well, talking about coping, right?
Hmm.
I had to learn to cope with my family dynamic because it was so different and there was so much pressure that was put on me or that I took upon myself.
Hmm.
And I think coping as a kid was also about retreating.
Mm.
Um,
Wait, retreating physically or mentally, emotionally, or how? Okay.
emotionally retreating. So I think that's where I could say I felt weak, meaning emotionally I wasn't heard in my house. My emotions didn't matter, right? I was never asked, "How do you feel?" Those were never questions that were asked to me. So
Mm.
I think I felt so I retreated. I held my emotions in. I didn't complain. I didn't say how I felt. I didn't talk about that. It was just like, well, this is the way things are, and like, I was like, like it was
Yeah.
fine. It was, happy go lucky Jody. But I think there was a lot of pain and a lot of sadness that I never expressed, which I think now adult Jody would say, well, that was weak, right? Like I wish I could have voiced that as opposed to just retreating and putting on a mask of covering up that everything was okay.
And I think that's actually a perfect example of what I meant by, you know, those are the moments where we can draw tremendous power from, because even though you felt or saw yourself as weak in that moment, looking backwards, or, you know, thinking about that, because it's a stark contrast to just, you know, oh, I'm hungry, I'm gonna go, you know, to the refrigerator or cabinet and get some food. Like, there's a stark moment, and because there's a stark moment there, there's a wealth of energy, or
Mm,
power, or you know, what have you, and that's where we draw our strength from.
yeah.
And for me, and that's kind of how, anytime I've worked with someone, or anytime, you know, I've been, you know, whether it's outside of acting or inside of acting, to me, that's, you know, the a perfect kind of an example of, like, this is a good place. This is not a place we need to shy from. This is a place that we need to live a little bit more, because there's so much power, because we can't change that moment. All we can do is accept it, and draw from it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, that's like, my parents were teachers and entrepreneurs,
Mm.
and they're big entrepreneurial for the most of my life, was where they were in headhunting, staffing.
Oh, okay.
So they, you know, recruiters, and temporary work and permanent placement. And so interviewing skills, how to interview someone and how to be interviewed for jobs, was kind of like the first life lesson. Um, and the weakness or your failures were probably my father's favorite thing in the world to find out, because he felt if a candidate uh, didn't recognize or wasn't able to point to any failures, then they were
Mm,
untested, And at the first sign of, adversity, which you're guaranteed to have in a job sooner or
Yeah.
later, they're going to buckle.
Mm.
And he didn't want to be in the trenches with them, because he
Makes
didn't
sense.
have time building a business to deal with an untested person, no matter how long they've been working. They could be 50 years old and have a great resume.
Right.
They're they're going to take a hit, sooner than later. So,
Right.
yeah, going back to the coping mechanisms, when did you first start to kind of recognize that you had coping mechanisms, or that you were dealing with things in a particular way, one way or the other? And
Oh
what were
God.
they?
Uh, I don't think I was. Oh God. I want to say my gut is saying that I wasn't consciously aware of coping mechanisms until college.
Oh,
I think I was so intertwined in my family dynamic,
so
which infiltrated, everything I did. But I
yeah,
think,
for sure.
look, at 17 years old, I remember being like, I'm out. I gotta get out. I gotta move. I gotta get out of here. I need to soar. I need space because I
Yeah.
started to feel suffocated in this place because I wasn't. Look, I mean, I excelled through high school. Like I said, my graduating class had like 1,000 kids. I was ranked 3 out of 1,000.
Oh, wow.
I excelled completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to go to Brown Med School for pre-med, and then I got accepted early to NYU for acting, and I was like, bye, go to New York, So,
See, a stable career as a doctor, or the most unstable career possible as an actor? Actor, please.
yes, please, I'll play one on TV,
Yeah.
So yeah, so like I got accepted early to NYU. I moved at 17 to New York City. I was like,
Nice.
I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as soon as I moved, it was just like it was almost a reality slap in the face of looking back at everything, going, "Whoa, look at what you dealt with. Look at what you did." And not from an angry place. Anger towards my parents came later, but that was into a different angry place. But it was just like, holy shit! Can I swear on this? I don't even know what to say.
Yeah,
But it was
yeah.
okay. It was just this awareness of, whoa, all the choices that I made and the freedom that I felt.
Mm-hmm.
And then being in acting class and choosing to be an actor and feeling seen and heard in my choices all the time
Mm-hmm.
was so fulfilling and almost a relief. Where then I became aware of some of the coping mechanisms that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, before we talk about anything that you're aware of, do you remember what you did as like a young teenager? And did you, and I know nothing about you on this aspect, but you know uh drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, caffeine, sugar, other types of food, those are all very common coping mechanisms.
Right.
Skipping school, boys, girls, like there's so many different things that we use consciously, unconsciously, to kind of find our relief. Did
Yeah.
you have any of the stereotypical coping mechanisms?
Oh gosh, Michael, I was such a good girl. I was such a good girl.
It doesn't really surprise me, to be honest with you.
Oh
That's where I'm like,
my
this could be an interesting line of questioning.
I mean, look, I went through my parents' liquor cabinet with my best friend Jessica, and we would
Sure.
drink some vodka and then fill it up with water and think no one would notice.
Little
Do you know what I
tasty,
mean?
yeah.
Like we did that. I would drink a wine cooler here and there and think I was whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But no, I mean, people were smoking pot, and I was like, I can't do that. Like I was such a goody two shoes. But I think I was terrified to lose control.
Yeah, I
I
get
think
that.
I learned how to control my life. I learned how to control the situation that I was in. And
Mhm.
anything that would make that unravel was scary, I think, to me at the time.
So another thing that I've seen, perhaps this maybe fits you better, is a common coping mechanism, kind of the unconscious, is overachiever. So were you like class
Yeah.
president? You were number
I was the
three.
president of drama club, voted the most likely to succeed. My GPA was like 3.9, whatever. I was in the drama club in 3 choruses and show choir. I was a workaholic at 13, 14, you know?
Sports as
Not
well, or
sports.
no
No, it
sports,
was all
all academic
academic
and
and
creative.
performing arts. Yeah,
Yeah.
creative. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's something my therapist said to me. She's like, well, at least you chose to be the overachiever because you could have gone in the other direction.
Yeah.
She's like, with everything you've gone through, she's like, it's pretty amazing that you chose to be the overachiever.
I
So,
somehow managed to kind of do a little bit of both. I think because I played like every season I had a different sport.
okay.
I was, doing theater. I was singing, and I was in the choir. I was in a traveling touring singing group.
Hmm.
I was also doing drugs, drinking, partying, and chasing, the girls as well. So like,
Well, I mean, look, I had a lot of boyfriends. We'll say that.
yeah,
That was probably the vice. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
But honestly, I do believe that scholastics and academics can be a vice and a coping mechanism just as equally,
Yeah.
and can be dangerous for some people. Like,
Mhm.
and when I say dangerous, meaning they hide behind it, they hide and they use it to hide from, and or to preach from. It's a
Right.
position of power that they can control, and
Sure.
I've seen people unfortunately unravel, and they usually,
Mm.
those types of people, like I think your acting probably set you free, what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
the
totally.
the other type that doesn't have the arts and is the overachiever, valedictorian type, all the scholastics, ends up somewhere around 30, from their high paying lawyer job, or whatever, lawyer is the stereotypical,
Sure.
but they're in a position of power, they're making a ton of money, and they crack.
Yeah.
I met a few years back, um actually a number of years ago already. I met this woman, and hanging out, like she was pretty normal for the most part. We got along, it wasn't a great fit,
Yep.
but her friend group were all these ultra successful 30 somethings
Okay.
going through adolescence all over again because they didn't get it, and they were all like trying all the drugs out, trying the alcohols and the wines and the travel, and they had the money to be dangerous.
Got it.
um and I think for the most part they were being mindful, and they were actually doing a good job of being responsible and taking care of themselves.
Mhm.
I have met a few people that did not take care of themselves, but it is a potential hazard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're in college, you're all of a sudden free, and you start to understand some of your coping mechanisms. I'm guessing it was unlocked through acting.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think having the space from my family unit,
Yeah.
like just to be able to see it from a distance and not be in it, and to see their coping mechanisms and my mom's passive aggressiveness, and
Mm,
just to see all of that. And you know because I think as a kid I didn't want to see that anything was wrong with your parents, and you can't
yeah.
see that anything is wrong because then you'll crack as a kid, because then you can't put trust in your parents. So that distance sort of helped me see that.
Mm,
But I do think it was acting that, like you said, I think it definitely saved me and soothed my soul to some degree, to just have that creative outlet that wasn't, responsible, right? It was just, I get to play.
yeah.
But then of course then I make a business out of play, which adds a whole other level of,
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we
you
could
know,
probably spend
oh,
hours just on what that all is. And I mean,
right.
acting as any kind of artistic endeavor as a business is a whole
Yeah,
nother thing unto itself.
totally.
Um, I'm
Totally.
curious, this is also just kind of a bit of a side thing. With your experience, there's some parallels between you and and I just think that the arts are the most important thing in a child's development. And not that it's not important for adults as well, but I feel like we need, as a culture, as a society, to give our children, our fellow humans, the best exposure to art, whether it's singing, music, acting, painting, sculpting. I think we just need to give it all to them, because some of them are going to be drawn to, one versus the other, or three versus those, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it will keep us healthier and safer. Do you
Yeah.
have a similar sense of that from your
Oh
experience?
gosh, of course.
I
Of
mean,
course.
it's no, I don't want to make this all about that. I don't want to turn this into like a social political, war cry, but
It's true though. I mean, look, at 10 years old, I distinctly remember, was it not 10 years old. One of my friends, his mom asked my mom, oh, there's auditions at the high school. Can I bring Jodie with, I think, Curtis to go audition? And my mom was like, sure, do you want to audition? I was like, yes. And that's when I did my first high school show when I was 10. But that's what saved me then, because I could already see my world shrinking and like losing myself in the dynamic I was in. And that totally saved me. In my high school, the arts program that we had was freaking phenomenal. Like, we won awards everywhere, traveled to Toronto, traveled here, like our choruses won things. Our drama club, we rented costumes from New York from the Broadway shows, because the our directors of the high school drama club were the artistic directors of the regional theater in town.
That's amazing.
Like, it was like, we were performing in like a 1,500 seat auditorium. Like, it was incredible. Then I moved to New York and I'm like, what's this 20 seat black box? Where's my dressing room? It was crazy, But that, I know that saved me.
Yeah.
Completely. And I just think it's so important to have an outlet and a creative outlet, especially now. I can't imagine, totally getting on a different topic, but being a kid growing up today with social media, with all of this, I don't even know what that would have done to my psyche.
It's interesting. I'm watching I have two young nephews. I hope I don't screw up their ages. I don't think they're listening anyways, but 15 and 12. Okay. And I'm watching kind of what's happening with them.
Yeah.
The eldest is, the youngest isn't so much into it yet. But the eldest is, for whatever reason, the way he's wired in my sister's family, he's using TikTok as an educational platform. And he has so much knowledge, like arcane, random, weird stuff, that it's like, why do you know this? Like, who are you?
I have a 16-year-old niece who is on the TikTok all the time. That's how she's learning. Oh, I want to make this recipe. I learned about it on TikTok, this thing. I'm like, what are you? Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm monitoring her on
Instagram. One of his good friends has a business, and she makes, I don't know how much money she's making, but she makes these like little crochet animals, like pets. And so he bought a bunch of crocheted pets, and they're really adorable and nice, and based off of the family dog. And she was able to make these and replicate them very well, so they all look the same. Oh my God. Because he gave us all, basically the family dog, little miniature versions. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think there's an opportunity to be an entrepreneur for a child that, like, I mowed lawns. That was my first job. And my father needed a new lawnmower. So I bought him a new lawnmower by getting clients around the neighborhood. Yeah. So social media, it's a whole nother game. But again, is it being used for that? How are kids being introduced? So some of the coping mechanisms, I'm guessing, that you developed or understood in college through performing and acting, came from early on acting and performing in the arts. So like, how do you see those, or how do you define them?
Well, I think when I got to college, then I started drinking, right? That was the coping mechanism. Oh, yeah. 17 years old, getting into those bars. The Mexican bars never carded. It was awesome.
Nice. Or not so nice. I don't know.
Exactly. I know, right? Yeah.
Right.
drinking was definitely a coping mechanism. I mean, acting was a coping mechanism in and of itself, right? To allow myself to feel anger. I remember
Yeah.
taking an acting class my freshman year, and some like big angry scene, and I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to let that emotion out. Especially as a woman, I think we're conditioned in a different way to
Oh yeah.
approach anger. But just as a kid, I never got angry about anything. So I mean, the acting really helped me tap into that. But I think coping mechanism still, I was a loner. I was definitely, I mean, now I think people look at me as like, oh, she's so social. She knows so many people. I was alone. Like I had like a little group of friends, but I was a loner. Even my junior year of college, I went away and interned at a theater for like 6 months. I had enough credits. I came back, I took a couple classes, and I graduated early, and I walked down the graduation aisle alone. I had no friend group in college.
That's really fascinating, especially because theater is so cliquey.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you deal with that element?
Um, I mean, I was sad. I was lonely. That's how I dealt with it. I went back to the Mexican bar. I did some tequila. I mean, but again, it's all choices I made. Like I made the choice to because I didn't want to spec. My parents took out loans to put me through college. I took out loans to put me through college. I mean, we were middle class, lower middle class. NYU was fucking expensive. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that
yeah,
they
super.
supported me for that, I mean, I got a scholarship and stuff, but still,
Yeah,
it took
it's
me
not covering
years to
everything.
pay those loans.
I mean, just to live in New York. I mean, even if you had all of tuition covered, just to live in New York and feed yourself and clothe yourself, I mean, that's super expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it adds up.
So I had enough credits. So I worked at a summer stock theater, and then they're like, "Well, do you want to stay?" For into my, like I said, it was into my senior year. I guess I stayed the first semester of my senior year, and then I think I went back and did a couple credits. But it was to save money too. I didn't have to pay for that semester, so yeah, I made the choice to stay. But what I noticed, and when I can go back now and look, is so many choices that I made kept me alone
Hmm,
in some way, to
that's
keep
interesting.
me from the real connections, the real friendships, the real community, which I think the older I got, I started to create my own community,
Yeah, oh,
right?
yeah,
Like,
for sure.
like now on Facebook, I have a community of 4,000 actors who tune in to hear what I say. Do you know what I mean? Because I create that community. I have 200, 300 clients in one of my programs. I've created that community, and they support me and I support them, but I've created that. Like now I know
So
the importance of it.
do you think you could be creating the community the way you create community had you not been such a loner?
Probably not. I mean, I have this conversation with my husband all the time. Even this morning we were talking about it, and it's just talking about how much responsibility I had as a kid, and he's like, "Well, I'm glad you had responsibility." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, then you that's why you are who you are now."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, fine."
Yeah.
Like I know that, I get that. So, I mean, all this stuff, gosh, I understand so much about myself and can feel like, oh God, why did I have to have that experience? Or, I look at other people's families, or, women my age who are best friends with their mothers, and I get jealous of that. But I go, well, but that's made me who I am now, and why I'm the person I am now. And I don't want to change who I am now,
Yep.
you
I
know?
mean, I think that's one of the things that whoever's listening out there, if they are feeling, like they don't have any friends, or and they're in their early 20s, and they're doing this thing alone, like that shouldn't be depressing, because in the moment it can be. And I'm sure you had
Yeah,
your moments of severe, like, oh my
sure.
God, this is the worst thing ever. And I've isolated myself. Most of the times I've isolated myself were pretty conscious, or I was conscious that I caused the isolation.
Sure.
But it's still tough. It's still
Yeah.
difficult. And there's such amazing value in that if you can understand that this too can and will serve you if you allow it to.
Right.
And
Right.
like, I know you are doing that now,
Yeah.
but not everyone listening might be doing that. And that, I mean, that's a
Mhm.
really huge part of why I'm asking, these in-depth kind of really personal questions, is
Yeah.
because, I had a woman on LinkedIn, was requesting career counseling services. I can't remember what the category, what they call it on LinkedIn. So, I submitted my proposal. Hey, this is, kind of in a nutshell how I work. And, I have a background in this.
Mhm.
Let me see if we vibe, and if we get along, let's figure out how I can help you. And she was like, great, what time, what's available? So I sent her a little calendar link, and then the next morning I get a message from her saying, I've changed my mind, thanks. And I'm like, well, just for my own metrics analytics,
Yeah.
would you mind telling me why? And she said, honestly, I can't afford it. I was like, I never told you how much it was going to cost, or if it was going to cost anything. So, why don't we talk, or let me see what I can do for you. And, no matter what, I told you I'd do a 15-minute thing. I checked the box,
Yep.
15-minute. And, typically my kind of modus operandum is I want to give as much information as possible. If you think you can do it on your own, good luck. If
Mhm.
you want someone to hold your hand, I'll hold your hand, because ultimately you've got to do the work. I can
Yeah.
just tell you
Right.
what to do, like,
Right.
but it's your work to do.
Yeah.
And we chatted for another minute online, and basically what her real concern was is just resume services. And I'm like, you don't really want to hire someone for that anyhow. Like,
Yeah.
so I gave her some resources, to do resumes. And Canva actually has an amazing service. I know you probably
Love
use
it.
Canva.
Yeah.
Canva
Yeah.
has an amazing resume service.
Yep.
So, and it doesn't really cost you much, or nothing, depending on how you use it. And she was like, oh my God, thank you. You're like the first person that's actually, like, offered that help at all. And I'm like, how is that possible? Like, LinkedIn is like designed for
Right.
nothing but, B2B
Interesting.
and like interactivity and networking.
Yeah.
Um, and that really is at the heart of why I feel like these conversations are so important to have,
Mhm.
because if people like her find this, or people not like her that are in need of other types of this type of stuff, because she just needs resume, she feels good on the other stuff right now, this is where you can get it for free.
Mhm.
So I know we're in the middle of this, but thank you for being so open and honest. I mean,
Right.
it's the whole value of this thing as I see it. So
Right. Yeah.
um
Of course.
so you're getting through college, you're you're drinking, you're being alone, you're doing what you've got to do, you're
It sounds
starting.
really sad now that I talk about it. I'm
But
drinking alone, all alone.
I mean,
No, I mean,
this, any perspective, with the right perspective, anything can be glorious and anything can
of
be
course,
horrific,
of
or
course,
horrible. So
of course.
um when you get out of school, now you're tasked with the Herculean, I don't know any other way of saying
Make
it,
a living.
making a living as an actress. And let's be honest, it might have gotten easier for women over the last 10 years, but you were doing this longer than 10 years ago. And even now, it's difficult for anyone,
Sure.
period, full
Yeah.
stop. And then certain people have even more difficult times ahead of them. And I can go down a whole rabbit hole of difficult times for reasons that, yeah.
Uh,
Anyways,
don't do
um,
it.
so how did your coping mechanisms begin to change? Because now we're getting into kind of the new lives, and, like, the different kind of stages and different
Yeah.
lives you've lived. So how does this start to evolve for you, and how do you start to kind of make all this work for you?
Yeah, I think after college, or I think it was probably my last year of college, and again, once I started feeling like I'm at the finish line and it's freedom, um, I think that's when the rebel kind of kicked in. Do you
Mhm.
know what I mean? Rebelled against my parents, rebelled against everything they stood for, rebelled against how they talked to me, rebelled against how just everything, dated the bad boys, did all the, my year after graduation, I didn't act at all. I didn't act for a whole year.
Oh
I got
wow.
into a money job.
You
I
didn't
was
even
making
try.
like, no, because I was making like $1,000 a week at this job, sales job.
Yeah.
I was able to get my own apartment in New York. Like, I didn't even have that roommate experience. I was living alone at 21, 22, like, you talk about choices, right? I'm living all alone by myself because I'm a loner. But I was making really good money. And I remember at one point, maybe a year after graduation, my dad was like, we're paying these student loans. You know, can you doing something with this? Like, what's going on? Um, and then I kind of like was like, okay, because I got caught up into making money, got caught up into nightclub scene, after hours parties. Like we're out partying till 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in New York. So you made money all day and then you party and then you sleep and you have to make money all day, And it was super fun because I never did that. So it was time to, rebel against it all. And but yeah, then that got old, pretty quick.
No, it's interesting though, because I was going to ask, and you kind of answered the question just now, but I was going to ask, did your rebelling coincide with making money? Because it's so much easier to rebel when you've got money. It's
good point.
Not that you can't rebel without money, but you rebel in different ways.
Sure.
And there's and then depending on the relationship and depending on a bunch of things, but that it's such a fascinating thing. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a good thing. I wish that I would have been more money hungry, because I would have been able to go through a few things early on when it would have been easier than later on in my late 30s, early 40s, where it's like, oh God, I still got to worry about money. Like, why didn't I just take care of this crap earlier? Like I outlined an entire book a couple years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, on financial literacy. And I've been having problems actually writing it because I go back and forth on who it's for. So, because when I outlined it, I'm like, this is what you need to know at 18. But then as I started looking at that, I was like, yeah, but most of the stuff, like, you really need to start focusing. You don't really have to start focusing on until you're like 25, 30. And then some of it's retirement stuff. So it's like, no matter how hard you hit on a, 25-year-old to say, your retirement will come earlier and earlier and earlier, the sooner you look at this, they're just not going to pay attention 9 times out of 10.
No.
So like, I can't, I haven't figured out how to actually write it yet because I don't know who it's for. Every time I think about it, it's for a different person, or a different stage of life. But but so I kind of envy you to a certain degree that you went through that and you owned that whole money, earn money, and care about money.
Let me just interrupt and go say that it was fleeting. You know what I mean? It was like maybe a good 2 years, 3 years, maybe. You know what I mean? But then then I started acting.
That's hilarious.
I did make money for a bit, and I did start an IRA in my early 20s. I just didn't keep funding it.
Yeah. Well, hey, at least you started it.
At least I started it.
Yeah.
I tell my assistants that now are in their 20s. I'm like, start your IRA. Compound interest. Compound interest is your friend, please.
Oh my God. If compounding interest should be the first thing taught, I think, in like 9th grade. Maybe.
Oh my God.
Like early on, that should be one of the most important things that kids understand is compounding interest. Because I kind of have a general way of looking at the world, which is we are all businesses unto ourselves. We are all entrepreneurs, whether we like it or not. Some of us just accept it or not. And social media, I think, to kind of what we talked about earlier, is exposing that. Facebook makes money off of our data. Google makes money off of our data. All of these services, all the news outlets, every single thing that we're tied into makes money off of our data. And we see none of it because we don't see ourselves as business entities. And, if that's a whole nother topic for another time. So you get into acting, then how does the rebelling change from that point then?
Yeah. Okay. So, Yeah, look, even through acting, I worked in sales, which was all commission based.
Yeah.
So I worked really hard and hustled.
Hmm.
Then I started my own sales company in New York.
Of
So I
course.
had my own team of salespeople that I trained, right, and did that. That was my first business. I've had 5 businesses, I think, in my life,
Nice.
not even including acting and all
Yeah.
that. But acting was interesting because then I graduate, I'm out in the world, I have fun for a year, then I go, okay, let me do this acting thing, and I start auditioning and I start booking things. But then I notice a pattern where everything that doesn't pay me, I book, and everything where there's money on the line, I don't book.
Hmm.
That I find some way to self-sabotage.
Hmm.
So that's really when I started to understand, yes, my coping mechanisms, yes, what I went through, yes, the awareness of stuff, but then going, whoa, how does this manifest in how I believe and how I'm showing up?
Yeah.
And that was, I started to understand how I felt about money. And look, I grew up with my dad being like, money doesn't grow on trees. You got to work hard to make money. Rich people are terrible. Like that was his mentality. So that was my mentality. Right.
Right.
But then part of my rebellion was rebelling against, this sounds terrible, but I think either we model our parents or we rebel against them.
Yep.
I rebelled against everything my parents said, stood for. I'm the exact opposite of both of them. And so I made it my mission. I think, I don't remember how old I was, but it was still early 20s to figure that out and to solve that. So I read every business book I could under the sun. I was trying to figure out, my limiting beliefs and how to reframe them and how to stop that self-sabotage, and all those excuses I was making was just my parents' voice, and they weren't mine. Those were their stories, not my stories. And it took me a long time to switch it. But once I did, then I booked like 7 commercials, and then I booked an off-Broadway show, and got to work with Stephen Schwartz, and like all this stuff happened.
Yeah.
But it was all mental.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I kind of, to a great degree, think, well, I don't know, not to get too esoteric, but I think this is all just an illusion.
Do you believe we're in the Matrix? Are you one of them?
Well, so I have a little moment in my kind of intro trailer to what this channel is.
Okay.
And I basically say, all the world, I quote Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, all the men and women are merely players. And that's the only part of it that I actually repeat. And every now and again, I'll memorize it, and then I'll forget parts of it. But the reason why I quote that is because for me, from a very early age, that was truth. This is all a game. This is all a play. And as far as I'm concerned, Shakespeare understood what we now refer to as simulation theory. So, and if you look at ancient cultures, and you look at primitive cultures, and you look at Greek mythology or Vedic texts, the dream, the illusion, the simulation, it's all there. And it's been there. This concept has been there for thousands of years. So the reason why it's now simulation theory is because of The Matrix. The movie The Matrix just changed the language and changed the story, our reference point for what this reality is or isn't. And, the Socrates, Plato, I think Plato, I can't remember who first really thought of, it's a little bit off topic, but we'll stick with it for a half a second. Idealism. So idealism as we know it today originally started as a philosophical equation stating that everything comes from consciousness. The mental is the all, and everything comes from the mental. And materialism basically states, nope, matter is real and everything comes out of matter. And so a true materialist believes that our consciousness isn't real, and our experience is just it's a accident of it's an emergent property of chemicals and whatever coming together. So most scientists are traditional materialists, and I can't remember who started the materialist movement, but it came later. And the idealist is, no, the mental is all, and we are creations of our consciousness. So, and then there's all kinds of amazing texts and amazing religions and amazing philosophies that bolster one side or the other. I believe that they're both
Sure.
right, because the only way you can have this physical existence is if the material is there, and the only way we can have consciousness is if the mental is the all, and then it utilizes the physical. Anyways, this is all getting way in the weeds. um the point of bringing all that up really is the acting element, and all
Yeah.
of the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely
Right.
players. Because I feel like as an actor, we can have this conversation about what role are you playing in your life. Are you playing the
Mm.
victim? Are you playing the I don't know, what's the word? Your father railed against the rich people, screw the
Yeah.
rich people.
Right.
Like, are you playing that role? And these are roles we put on that then limit us to our own station, or relegate us
Yeah.
to, a
Hmm.
hell, a prisoner, or whatever. And
Hmm.
so getting away from kind of the esoteric philosophical, or quantum physics of it all, there's a very practical reality in this idea that we're just playing roles, and how do we break out of those characters and play different roles?
Hmm.
And I feel like you may not have thought about it like that, but I feel like that's exactly what you were doing.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at what point in time, like, I know you're still acting, as I am,
Mhm.
because we're addicts. I don't know how else to say it. We're driven by some internal spirit. How about that's a much
Yeah.
more romantic way of
There we
saying it.
go. I love it.
Um, but we are both entrepreneurs
Yes.
seeking to add value to other people's existence
Hmm.
in whatever way we can.
Hmm.
So at what point in time, like, in this whole process, this kind of gets into, again, the many lives that you've led. At what point in time did you realize all of your coping mechanisms and all of your analysis and your joy had the ability to empower other people?
Ooh, what a good question. Well, there's that point in New York where I was educating myself, right?
Mhm.
And I said, I was sick of I was sick of being that starving actor. I was sick of being that failing actor. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, I gotta figure it out. And
Mhm.
it's not that I don't know my goals or who I am or what I sell or I don't have talent. It's like it's this other thing, right? So that's when I started, figuring out all the limiting beliefs and excuses work. And I do a lot of that in the courses that I teach. But also at that time, I was reading business books and coming up with branding principles, marketing strategies, looking at how businesses were doing that and going, how can I apply that to me, the person? How can I
That's
apply that
awesome.
to me, the creative artist?
Mhm.
And that's when my career started taking off. So then there was a point where, because all the complaining actors were like, hanging out together. I was in the complaining actor circle. And then I started
It's
moving
a
out of the
horrible place
complaining
to
actor.
be, isn't it?
Oh, it's a terrible circle. It's a terrible one. It's a terrible place. I refuse to go back there. So I was moving
I
out of it, and people were saying, "Can I take you out for coffee? Can I pick your brain? What's going on?" So after, like, the 40-second free coffee date, I went,
Mhm.
"Huh, I think I have a skill set. I think actors don't know how to do this, and I've
Mhm.
taken this time to figure this out." And I was like, "I wonder if I could coach on this." So I started, like, charging like $45 an hour or something, for
Nice.
coaching sessions, and
Yeah.
that's how I started my business. And that's when I realized, I can I can help people. I can teach people something that I loved learning. I love business strategies. I love learning new things. I love frameworks. I love systems. I love structure. I love that stuff.
Me
I
too.
thrive in that stuff.
Yeah.
And but the creative brain doesn't like that stuff, which is most actors. I feel like I'm a very balanced left and right brain person,
Mhm.
and I know how to, like, switch it on and off. Um, but realizing that most people don't have that. So that's when I started my business, and it was so fulfilling. to coach someone, have them go, what? And then all of a sudden they got a Broadway show, or all of a sudden they got this, or they got their first agent. And that's when everything started, teaching started opening up. But I think starting that business, I started my first company I started my first coaching company in 2007.
Okay.
I started teaching at universities all over New York. God, I remember one of my first times teaching was at NYU, where I went to school. And when I would get nervous, my chest would get like bright red and my neck would get red, right? I'd get this like nervous rash. And I had a business partner in my first business, and he looked over at me. He's like, and afterwards he was like, oh my God, I thought you were having a heart attack. I thought you were going to pass out. I was so nervous. And now I can like get in front of people and talk. But what I think that business taught me, which is, here's the thing, as an actor, I always thought acting was being someone else. I always thought acting was hiding, right? Because I was hiding from the life that I had, and I got to be somebody else, which was thrilling. And now I know acting is showing pieces of myself and allowing that to be seen, right?
So I just gotta, I gotta share this for a second. So my secret, I have kind of a bit of a secret reason for acting all my life. I mean, there's so many reasons that I love acting and why I want to do it. And, but one of the kind of more secret reasons is that I feel like acting gives you the power to, self-realize or shed light on all of the different planes. Like if three-dimensional space is made up by infinite two-dimensional planes, up, down, left, right, whatever, then acting gives you the opportunity to shine light on all of those different planes and all of those different aspects to really just become a self-realized person. I don't know how to explain it.
I agree. I agree.
And
there's so much to grow within yourself when you're playing another person and trying to understand them and their psychology. And it's thrilling. It's so thrilling.
And that's actually, I think, probably the biggest reason for me that I don't think I could ever not be an actor, because I'm not sure if I am anything if not an actor, because the more I dive into me, I would say the more I find, the more sides of myself, the more aspects of myself. And then it goes back into the idea of simulation theory, or this is all a dream or just an illusion, because it's like, well, what part of me would you like to see? and then you get to also find out who triggers what side of you. And it's like, that's interesting. This person's bringing up, a little bit of anxiety or animosity or, whatever. Where's that coming from? And you can see, like, the first time I went to Europe, I would see people that I knew constantly. I didn't know any of these people, but I just was like, oh, there's John, there's Todd, there's Jen, there's, and they weren't them, but like their energy and their kind of the way they carried themselves was so similar. It's like, oh, wow. And I just noticed like how similar we all are, and how the different roles we're playing are everywhere, and different versions of ourselves in Italy, in Germany, in whatever country, or from whatever country. And it just bolstered this idea of we're all just playing these roles.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, this is something that I'm curious. You're not a famous actress, right? Unless something happened. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet, right. So I've beat my head so hard. And so I'm kind of curious to see what your thoughts are, because this kind of goes into coping mechanisms and how we deal with not getting what we want. I am like you. I am left brain. I am right brain. I am science. I am art. I am this weird amalgamy, and sometimes it gets blurry, and I'm speaking science from an artistic standpoint and just really confusing the hell out of someone who's actually like a science person, or an art person for that matter.
Right.
And I have felt that, and this is really just from feedback from agents and managers and casting directors, that it's like, we need someone that's really this, and you're kind of this, or we need someone that fits into this. And I used to think, man, I'm just not doing a good enough job uh, really showing them how to use me
Yeah.
and showing them like I can be this, but like part of it's I need to know this because, if I'm going to show you this, then I need to know what you're looking for. And because, you know, the business used to be a business of acting. Now the business is a business of personality. So if you come in, whatever personality you come with is how they decide who you are. So I had casting
Right.
directors, my manager would say, well, this casting director won't bring you in because they think you're a drama and they're doing a comedy. This casting director is now doing a drama and they think you're a comedy and too funny and aren't serious enough to do what they're doing. And it's like, do these people not talk? Like
No, they
I've
don't.
done it both. Um, but I'm not complaining. I'm not, that's kind of where I was for a good period of time.
Mhm.
And I finally gave up fighting, trying to get people to see me. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to bring what I bring. They're going to see it. They're not going to see it, whatever. But what I'm trying to get at is you don't represent the typical female character. You are a very
Mhm.
dynamic, very multifaceted, multidimensional, powerful woman.
Thank you.
And I've seen you perform enough times in workshop to know how you come off and what your kind of default is.
Mhm.
Not that I
Sure.
haven't seen you put on some different masks and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know she existed.
Mhm.
Um, but in most of your defaults, you come off as very powerful, multidimensional, and multifaceted. And let's face it, most female characters are not written multidimensional, multifaceted. So to me, from what I've seen, I would say that's a little bit of a hindrance
Mhm.
in booking
Sure.
work. So, like, how have you managed that expectation and, that kind of reality, because it's out of your control. It's not something that you can, like, I
Sure.
would go into some auditions, just want to try to hit all the kind of clarification points. I would go into auditions sometimes and I would off balance myself or stand in a way where I was kind of off balance because I knew 90% of the time people thought of me as incredibly grounded and stable. And so
Sure.
I would literally go in and do what I could to kind of give off an impression like I might just fall over. and um and it actually worked more than once. But so, like, this is a coping mechanism for dealing with things you can't control,
Yes.
and also trying to, like, what can you control, and you know what I mean, like, so it's kind of a little bit of a multifaceted question. But does it all make
Yeah.
sense in how you dealt with things? And
It does. Why I started my business, essentially, is to help actors do that, right? Because look, I can't deny that I have a strong bone structure.
yeah,
I can't deny that I talk with conviction. I can't
yeah,
deny those things.
yep,
I can't deny that I have good enunciation, you know. But what I can do, what I know but I am in control of how I show up.
hmm,
So when I have a role that might be, because that's why I always play like upper class wealthy women, I'm like, I never, that's not how I grew up. That's not my story. It's not anything. But knowing how I am perceived, knowing how, the perception of who I am, I know how to, I don't want to say shift that. I know what to do to subliminally allow them to see something else.
yeah,
I know what to wear to shift that perception. I know how to change my hair, my makeup to change that perception. I know how to change even just how I speak just a little bit to change that perception for roles. Because I think we are way more in control than we think of how we want people to see. Because you're already talking about all the freaking masks we wear, all the people that we are. It's just, what are you shining a flashlight on? It's like the Jungian theory of psychology. It's like we have the anima and the animus. So it's like, what are
hmm,
you putting the flashlight on? We have all of this stuff within us, but what are you showing? So I think if you can really understand who you are, how you're perceived, how you want to show up in the business, number one, because if you don't bring yourself in the equation, you're just going to get bitter, jaded, burnt out, and leave the business. We see it every day. But you got to understand all that. Then you can make very specific, strategic marketing decisions to show people what you want them to see.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's awesome.
That's the fun of it.
That really just kind of, I think, perfectly encapsulates what we should be doing in all aspects of our lives, period. Like, I mean, like, to me, the acting business, because it is an incredibly brutal business, because more often than not, they don't really want to know you until they want to know you, and they're not going to want to know you until they need you, and they don't want to need you until they need you. So,
and then they don't need you, and then they want someone who's like you.
Yep. And then they want a younger version of you. So, I feel like in some weird way, the entertainment industry, primarily being an actor, is a microcosm of everything and anything that can go wrong in any other aspect of business. And we, in some way, are the canary in the coal mine of what's going on. Like, there's certain things that I noticed 20 years ago, which are now, and because I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina, trying to get acting work right out of college. There's a whole weird reason why I ended up there, but and while there, I found out that I wasn't thought of as a white guy, but I also wasn't thought of as an ethnic guy either. And I wasn't white enough for any of the white roles that were cast out of Wilmington, North Carolina 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now. And I wasn't ethnic enough to be the ethnic guy. And then, and so it was a conundrum of like, okay, if this is not how they see me, how can I begin to change things? And there's other factors involved, for me, personally, but it was a fascinating kind of discovery of really looking at how I saw people, how other people saw me, how we see each other, and how we can be invisible, or be seen. And like, I would go to parties and practice being invisible, and then practice being seen, just to kind of see like how to, kind of shift my polarity, if you will. So, but I just think what you're doing in general, I think really has a much broader appeal than just the entertainment industry. And did you know Sam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hutchinson. Yes. Yeah. We had a couple meetings. We would refer people to each other. He was a lovely human.
He was amazing. I loved him. Why did I say his name?
Well, he did a lot of brand work, essence work as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just think that work in general is just so important, I think, or else we're fighting all the time. I can't, like, I want to play this. Why won't they see me for this? And it's like, okay, well, because that's not what we see. If you want me to see that, well, then we got to shift your packaging. We got to shift what we're seeing here. It's like straightening your hair, coloring your hair a different color, or whatever. Like, what can you control? Right. But you gotta, I think people spend so much time fighting, being all things to all people, giving their power away, trying to be the people pleasers. Most actors are people pleasers. Most artists are people pleasers. Most women can be people pleasers, so we tend to just go, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? I'll be it. As opposed to, but who do you want to be? And what is the perception of you? And is that how you really want to show up?
And also being patient for you to find the team that's willing to go along for that ride.
Yeah.
Because I've gone through so many agents that just didn't want to go down one path or the other with me. They had their own agenda, and trying to get them on board was difficult. Because they've been around for a long time and they know what they're doing. Like, really?
Right,
Do
right.
you
And
though?
give our power away. Like sometimes we know, but we'll give the power away.
Yeah,
You know,
that's fascinating.
going back to sort of masks, roles, this, that too. I think I've been teaching branding to actors for over 13 years now, and even my systems of doing that have shifted. And one big thing that I include now in what I teach is themes.
Mhm.
And like, what themes are you drawn to? Because some people are just like, oh, brand, oh, I'm bubbly, that's my brand, or oh, I'm the Jessica Chastain type, that's my brand. It's like, no, it's more than that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's deeper than that. And people don't think of it that way. And like really thinking about like what are you drawn to? What are those roles that you're like, oh God, I love that? Or what's that movie you watch over and over and over again? And really examining all those pieces and going, well, what's the common thread though? What's the glue that's holding all of this together? And when I did that for me, it's like all of my women struggle but persevere. All of my women are fighting for something, whether that's to be seen, love, justice, truth, revenge. They're fighting for something. They're not passive women. Do you know what I mean? I don't play passive women.
All right.
And a lot of them are elitist and narcissistic, which that struck me when I was like, why is that something I'm drawn to? Or why do people see me as that? And it didn't hit me even until last year when I went, oh, my mom's a narcissist. Oh, isn't that funny? I want to understand my mother better.
Yeah.
So that's why I always wanted to play those roles and was
Yep.
drawn to those roles, is I wanted to understand my mother. So I think that's what keeps me in this business and keeps me going, is it's not like, let me play this co-star nurse and then I move on to this and then it's like, no, like, what are the stories I'm telling and how am I bringing myself to all of these roles? And I know I'm in it for the long haul. I have longevity in it. Like, it's going to hit. It's just when it's my time,
Yeah.
and I always knew I was going to hit later in my career just because of my presence and strength. And like, I go in for women much older than I am, and I don't book it because they always cast someone older, but it's just how I carry myself. So I know that. So
Some of my self-sabotage actually comes from something that I keyed into when I was a child and didn't even realize it was a hazard to my younger career. But when I watched Star Wars when I was a child, and every year after that,
right.
the person that I most identified with and the person that I most wanted to emulate and be was Obi-Wan Kenobi. I wanted to be the old man as a little kid.
But come on, we all wanted to be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I think I might have taken it to another level. My first meeting in New York, I went into met with like Wilhelmina. I had a meeting with the, I don't know, muckety muck at Esquire magazine, men's magazine. And I sat down with her,
yeah.
and she's like, I really like you. You're really interesting. She's like, but we've got a problem. I was like, okay. And she's like, you look too young to be an adult, to be a man, to kind of fit that role, those, that type of look and everything else. But you give off a power of someone a lot older. And we need those two to kind of, come together.
Yeah.
And to a great extent, it was far more important to me to become an old Jedi Knight than it was to understand how to be a young guy or whatever.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I had I think I was like maybe 28 or so, like maybe even around my 30th, that I had a group of male friends, and mostly by circumstance I had these friends, and they taught me how to be one of the guys. And then I started running into this issue of, well, we like you for this lead role, but we need a name.
Right.
And so I was like, well, being a dude sucks then. Like, screw this. And that was, that was my early 30s, was like constantly getting beat out or being told, man, if Jake Gyllenhaal doesn't take this, this is going to be a great project for you. Like, well, is he going to pass? No. Or whatever, whatever the circumstances was. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting journey, but at the end of the day, that need to become the Jedi master, that the need to become self-realized, the need to understand, these higher mystic levels of human existence, were more important to me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's really not good for your acting career if you're like the young jock, frat boy, or
Right.
I don't know if I can play a frat boy. Like, maybe if he's a sadistic alcoholic frat boy, like, that could be fun. I'd do that.
Right.
But yeah, it's been an interesting journey of human experience, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of tied up what we need to tie up. So what last kind of thoughts and feelings? I remember why I brought up Sam Christensen. He evidently works with a lot of people outside the entertainment industry.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if that's right for you or whatever, but that's what I was thinking, because, wow, what you do and your knowledge and skill base has such an important, I think, basis in reality and humanity, that I feel like you could help anybody, even though your classes are really geared towards the entertainment industry. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
So do you have...
it goes back to like the different lives, right? So, my first company I had was The Savvy Actor, and it was all about coaching actors. And I had that business for about 8-9 years. And my business partner and I had a falling out after I moved to Los Angeles. It was like a huge, messy divorce, even though we were never married, but it happens with business partners.
Good times, yeah.
Good times. And I reactively started another company and called it Accelerated Artist, under the guise of expansion, right? Into small business owners, creative entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. And I started doing that. And 6 months into it, I was not happy. I was not a happy girl. And I realized that my identity was tied up in being a coach. So I reactively started another business, as opposed to taking a breath. And I said, well, now I get to expand this and go to all these places, because people told me that my work could do that. So I was like, well, let me do it. It's not what I wanted to do. I got further and further and further away from acting, right? And like the other roles that I wanted to be in my life. So I did that business for maybe a year and a half, and then walked away from it. And I had another partner at the time, a woman who was a career coach with me, and I trained her as a coach in my former company. And then I honestly left the business to her. I left the business to her and all my intellectual property. And I was like, I need to leave. I need to go. And I said,
so bold.
You do with this what you will. I said, it's still mine. I'm going to use it again later, but I need it. And I left. But also during that time, I also got divorced, dismantled a production company that I had, left that business. It was like, so that was a big, life change at that point.
We could probably do a second episode just on that, just on divorce, production company, and career shifting identity. I mean, because that's, I'm sure, just full of amazing experience and valuable nuggets of wisdom and for the world to at some point, maybe if you're willing to share all that.
Sure. Yeah, it was definitely a big shift, but that's when it started kicking off for me. That's when my audiobook career started kicking off for me. That's when I finally made 6 figures in my business. Like, all this stuff started happening, just to like shed everything and go, this is not what I wanted. Now let me start from truth.
Yeah.
And that was power. Powerful.
That's awesome.
It was scary. Really awesome. It was very scary, but it was powerful.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think to some extent that's kind of why I'm doing this, because this is, on my own, this is who I like being more than anything else. And so this is the role that I like playing. I want to see how I can help people, and I want to kind of get inside people's heads and find out why they do what they do. And I think that's valuable for other people. On a more collaborative level, like if I'm going to work with other people, there's that my priorities start to shift, or what I need or what I want starts to shift.
Yeah.
Or the role that I want to take on or don't want to take on starts to shift. And I think that's a super valuable thing for people to understand. Like, you do have to do what you are drawn to, even if it's against your financial interest, so to speak.
Right.
In the long run, it will be your most beneficial choice.
Always. It
Yeah.
always will. The money will come, you know, it will. But it's got to, or else we just feel like, I think for so many years, I just felt trapped in what I created,
Mm.
you know? Um, but then we don't always have that. Oh, I didn't have the time. I'll speak for myself, to figure out what I really wanted. I didn't take the space to do that, because you got to keep going, and this next audition, this thing, I got to make money, I got to do this, I got to do that. But if we're not doing something because it's part of our value system, or if we're not doing it because it's our truth, or it feels authentic, or I don't know, it's like, what's the point? What's the point?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said for slowing down and finding out what the point is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from from a materialistic standpoint, we need our tools to be sharp,
Yeah.
and to carry that into more of the idealistic. If our consciousness, if our mental tools aren't sharp, then again, how effective are we going to be at doing whatever we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to get dulled, which has so many connotations, by things that are of little to no interest.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes problems more often than not.
Always, always. And life is too short. One of the big things that drives me, um, I feel so compelled to leave a legacy. I feel so compelled to leave something bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And whether that's through, something I write, something I produce, something I act in, or the teachings in my programs, I want them to live beyond me. I want to leave something here. And I feel so compelled to do that. I know I'm not having kids. It's not part of my plan. I raised a special needs daughter, I feel like, in my life already. And I just feel so compelled to leave a legacy. And that's what drives me, and that's now what keeps me sort of in alignment with my vision, right?
Yeah.
What's the legacy I want to leave?
And before I moved out here, back in like 2000-ish, 1999, 2000-ish, I was reading some play, and for whatever reason, it just kind of sparked me, and I wrote on the cover of the play, "To be immortal for others." And I've never forgotten that, because to some extent, I feel like, immortality is not for us, it's for the future generations. So
Sure.
if you're seeking immortality, again, this is me going esoteric, but seeking immortality, then it really has to be about what you're doing for other people.
Right.
Because otherwise it has no value. Like, just to be alive forever has no value unless
Right.
you're doing it to cultivate something for others. And that's, I think, what a legacy is. A legacy is immortality, which is really about, allowing people to stand on the shoulders of giants. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. I love that.
I mean, closing thoughts. I'll make sure to put your links in the bio description, show notes, and everything. What are your closing thoughts? And we can always do a round two, of course, because there's so much more there.
Gosh. Oh, I don't know. I feel like we've talked about so much.
No pressure.
I feel like the legacy was my closing thoughts, but
yeah, no, I think that's a great place to end, because you have created something amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, that was part of my interest in having you on, is that I think what you're doing is really interesting. And it's, like I said, I think the value is greater than just the entertainment business. Obviously, you've explored that, and that's not for you, but that doesn't mean other people can't learn from you and can't, see what you're doing and find value in it, even from a distance. So,
Right. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I will, don't forget to leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. New episodes every Tuesday, and check us out on YouTube for short clips from each episode. Thank you. And until next time, remember, your life story is yours to write and rewrite as many times as you want.